I would like to quickly point out that John the Mouse Video has a large selection of videos from North and South America for your viewing pleasure. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Now let's get into the cheese of the matter. In this video, I'm going to take you along to see the newly restored trucks that are on display in Iowa 80 Trucking Museum. Before we start, I would like to give special thanks to Iowa 80 for allowing me to use the voice recordings from their app as parts of the video. Now, let's get to the cheese of the matter. Expansion of the museum was completed in 2016, almost doubling the space for trucks to be displayed. Over 130 trucks will be able to be on display, with the additional 26,400 square feet added to the truck exhibit hall. There is always something new to see as they get newly restored trucks on the floor as they complete them. They have an app that lets you scan the trucks on the expedition so you can learn more about them as you inspect them up close and personal. If you can't make it in person, check out their website and app to experience it from home. Information on the web and app, it's listed below. To see more trucks on display, check out the links below. Let me know what video and truck was your favorite on the comments below. If you like this video and would like to support this channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for all your comments and views. I have more videos for you to check.
Tires on earliest trucks were solid rubber. Air-filled tires came later. This tire press was used to mount the solid rubber tire onto the rim. It was specifically made for that job. It weighs about 8,000 pounds and it pushes 200 tons of pressure. In old-time machine shops, there were big power shafts mounted on the ceiling and powered by an engine. Belts from the power shaft would engage the belt on the tire press. You'll see there's an electric motor on this press, which was a later addition. Early solid rubber tires and rims weighed as much as 700 pounds each. The wheels have a rim. The solid rubber tire has a steel ring around it too. It's called an interference fit. The tolerances are very tight. You put it in the tire press, and with 200 tons of pressure, you put the tire onto the wheel. It was a lot of work to change a tire, but you did not have flats, fortunately. The solid rubber tires would eventually just wear out. Walker electric trucks were made in Chicago from the early 1900s to 1942, and they were always electric. It had an 84-volt, 3.5 horsepower DC motor in the rear axle. It could go 40 to 50 miles on one charge. The batteries were huge, 400, 500 pounds, and they were in a wood case with an asphalt coating. Top speed is somewhere around 20 miles an hour, not much faster than a golf cart. This particular truck was a milk truck. It still smells a bit like sour milk, a little milky in the back. Even after all these years, I can just imagine what it was like to make deliveries to the hotels, restaurants, clubs, and hospitals in downtown Chicago way back then.
Hello, nice of you to join me on my route. My name's Patrick, and I work for the Bowman Dairy Company, and this is my Walker electric delivery truck. It's made of wood, and it runs smooth and quiet. You won't even hear me coming down the road. The best thing about an electric truck? No hand crank. There's nothing worse than having to hand crank a start every time you want to get going. The tires on this beauty are made of solid rubber, so there's no worries about flats. I do have to be careful not to get stuck in the mud. This truck is heavy and the tires are narrow. I also have to make sure I get back to the shop before I run out of battery power. But I just charge it up overnight and it's ready to go the next day.
Iowa 80 bought this truck at an auction in Kansas City. This is truck number 12, made by Walker in 1911. So we know there were at least 11 more of them. This one is very rare. The Touring Company of Philadelphia was not having much success selling its touring cars. In 1913, they began assembling trucks like this 1913 Vim. The company became the Vim Motor Truck Company in 1915 and sold more than 13,000 trucks per year from 1915 to 1917. By 1916, Vim laid claim to being the largest producer of delivery trucks in the world. This truck has a 22 horsepower Vim engine, 4 cylinders, 3-speed transmission, and chain drive. It has wood spoke wheels with pneumatic tires. The cab is known as a C cab because of its shape. Merchants big or little may purchase Vim trucks from any Vim dealer on monthly installments, says the advertising. $1.50 a day pays for it. Not as much as you pay for that extra driver. Vim touted their trucks as being sturdier than other delivery vehicles. Some dealers deliver with converted pleasure cars, overloading engines, chassis, transmissions, and springs, a plan which results in enormous upkeep and running costs for which the customer must eventually pay. This 1914 Diamond T is the oldest in our collection. We believe that it is the oldest Diamond T in existence. The Diamond T Motor Car Company was founded in Chicago in 1905 by a gentleman named C.A. Tilt. His father had been in the shoe business. The diamond stands for quality, and his father put Diamond T on the sole of his shoes. That's where the name comes from. The steering wheel is on the right. It has hard rubber tires, wood wheels, and brakes on the front axle. The shift lever is in the middle, so the driver would have shifted gears with his left hand. It has a Timken worm drive rear axle. Timken rear axles were used by a lot of trucks. It allowed for high ground clearance, but unfortunately was not very heavy duty. Diamond T was acquired by White Motors of Cleveland, Ohio in 1958. Manufacturing was moved to Lansing, Michigan, and the last Diamond T was rolled off the assembly line in 1966. From the first truck to the last, the Diamond T brand was known for quality and style. This 1915 Mack AB happens to be the oldest AB that's known to exist. They were a very popular truck. Mack has good records on every single truck they ever built. This is serial number 361. It's the earliest one that they've ever had an inquiry on. It was a great truck in the right size and at the right price. From the beginning, Mack trucks were known for durability. This model was made from 1914 to 1937, which is a long time and basically unchanged in design the whole way through. They were made in 3 sizes, 1.5 ton, 2 ton, and 2.5 ton. 383 AB models were made in 1915. Mack ABs were made in either worm drive or chain drive. They came in many gear ratios, all of them slow. Depending on the gear ratio, they had a top speed of 13 to 25 miles per hour. Now remember, that may not be faster than a horse, but a horse could only go so long and then had to rest. You might have to change horses in the middle of the day, too. The truck would just keep going hour after hour. The Mack Brothers Company was founded in Brooklyn, New York by John and Gus Mack. There were 5 Mack brothers who were associated with auto and truck manufacturing in the earliest years. Early trucks were built in Allentown, Pennsylvania. By the mid-1920s, the company had been sold, and the Mack brothers were no longer involved. There were a lot of trucks made in the early years, but not many made in Iowa. This 1918 Independent is a local truck. It was made in Davenport, Iowa. This was the only truck brand manufactured in Iowa, and they were only made for a short time. There's a glass windshield, but no wipers. In 1918, you were lucky to have a roof, door, and window. You didn't have a defroster either. You used your sleeve, no doubt, to wipe the interior of the window off. You weren't going very fast. Chances are the driver put his hand out the window and wiped it occasionally. They hadn't thought all of those creature comforts that we now consider necessities very well through. The front window opens partially, and that's your air conditioning. Lots of windshields back then opened from the top, and that was your ventilation. There are no other vents in the cab. Independent was one of those little brands that didn't last all that long, but it was made right here in Davenport. It is an assembled truck, as many were at that time. That is, they bought parts from various sources and put them together into trucks they called Independent. This 1918 Vim was the pickup truck of its day, an in-town delivery truck. It has a 22 horsepower Vim 4-cylinder engine and 3-speed transmission. Top speed, 25 miles per hour. In an open C-cab truck, that might have seemed like high speed. According to a Vim ad from 1916, with a Vim you can cover 3 times as much ground as with a horse and wagon, and at no greater expense. But unlike horses, no resting, no substituting. It keeps right on going day after day. Vim pays for itself out of its earnings, the advertising claims. If the truck could cover 3 times as much ground as a horse and wagon, a merchant could replace 3 horses, wagons, and drivers with 1 truck. The truck was offered with 1 chassis option, but 11 different open bed and closed panel bodies. Or buyers could purchase just the chassis and build their own body. Vim trucks were designed and marketed as delivery trucks for merchants. The concept of individuals owning a small pickup-style truck was not yet widespread until much later. This 1919 Ford is actually a Model TT, which is a little heavier duty than a Model T. Most TTs have a planetary 2-speed transmission. This one has a 3-speed auxiliary transmission. That gives it more gears to haul heavier loads. Road conditions back then were lousy. They were driving in mud and they didn't plow the snow. With a 2-speed transmission, you would have a narrow power band in 1 gear and it would be running wide open. In the next gear, it would be lugging. If you had more gears to choose from, you could find the ideal spot to actually run the truck. The engine in the Model T truck was the same as the Model T car. It had very little power. 4 cylinders, very simple. Just about anybody could afford one, and just about anybody could fix it. This truck came from the factory with just the chassis, hood, fenders, steering wheel, and a place to sit. It was up to the buyer if they wanted to add a cab with a roof, windshield, and a bed. A truck would have been bought from the factory with a cab and bed, if you wanted it, but many people chose to make their own. There weren't any safety standards or requirements to care about back then. By 1919, Pierce Arrow already had a history of building luxury cars, but there was nothing luxurious about this 1919 Pierce Arrow truck. The truck is well engineered and well built. It performed well and held up under heavy use, but there is no luxury involved. It has a 4-cylinder engine, and the cylinders were cast in pairs. There is a 1-piece crankcase and non-detachable cylinder heads. It is a crank start, solid rubber tire with a worm drive. The dump bed is hydraulic. The George N. Pierce Company dates back to the 1870s. Their first venture into transportation was with building bicycles in Buffalo, New York. They built their first car in 1901 and their first truck in 1912. In 1908, the company name was changed to Pierce Arrow Motor Car Company. During World War I, the plant in Buffalo employed 10,000 workers, and they built 14,000 trucks for the French and British military. The Depression took its toll on Pierce Arrow, and they built their last trucks in 1932, although White Motor Company continued to make trucks with the Pierce Arrow name until 1935. The company ceased all operations in 1938. This is a 1926 Mack AC with a 1926 Rogers Trailer Company trailer. The Mack AC looks the same as it did when they started making them in 1916. It has a C-cab, the windshield opens forward, but there wasn't much need for airflow through the windshield since there were no doors. Top speed was in the 15 to 20 mile per hour range. The tires are solid rubber and they are well worn down. They could not go flat, but they could wear out. This has the Renault-style radiator behind the engine. The headlights on the truck and trailer are kerosene powered. It is a chain drive. This was basically the same truck that Mack made in 1916 and the same one they continued to make through 1937. There wasn't much that could go wrong with a truck like this, and there wasn't much that most owners could not fix. If the chain broke, you just replaced a link. Most people could do that. A truck like this with a heavy trailer probably did not travel very far.
Rogers have been building trailers to haul equipment since 1905. This trailer was built in 1926 in Pennsylvania by the Rogers Brothers Corporation. This trailer has a serial number of 217. Type is 2045. Today you'll see Rogers trailers in 65 countries across the world. The Caterpillar 60 crawler tractor is powered by a 4-cylinder overhead gasoline engine that produces 60 horsepower at the belt and 35 horsepower at the drawbar. The 60 was a 72-inch gauge machine and weighed 20,500 pounds. It was manufactured by the Caterpillar Tractor Company from 1925 until 1931. The 60 was the largest tractor in the Caterpillar's product line at that time. The C.L. Best Tractor Company in 1925 and the Holt Manufacturing Company merged and formed the Caterpillar Tractor Company. The Best 60 was renamed the Caterpillar 60. The Caterpillar 60 was originally introduced as the C.L. Best 60 track layer. The Best 60 was the most successful tractor in the model line. Between 1919 and 1931, 18,948 was manufactured.
This vintage moving van is on a truck chassis called a Fisher Jr., built in 1927. From the size of the truck, you can see that back then we didn't have near as much stuff as we do now. Furniture, pianos, and fine arts, it says on the side of the truck. Well, of course you have to move a piano. We have one in the truck now to show. We had the body of this truck completely remade by a cabinet maker. Fisher Jr. was made by the Standard Motor Company. It had a Continental engine. It was an assembly truck. Standard Motor Company purchased parts like engines, transmissions, and axles from others and assembled them into their trucks. Judging by the springs, it's not a heavy-duty truck. It has a 6-cylinder engine though, but it's not overpowered by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, it would be under-braked because it only has rear brakes. It has rod-type mechanical brakes. There was no way to hook them up to the front wheel because the wheels had to turn when you steer the truck. The claim to fame for this 1929 relay is its patented relay drive system on the rear axle. Relay claims superior traction, and this truck would go where others would not. This is a chain drive truck, and the weight is carried by a separate tube and axle. The drive part is below, and there are gears on the outside below the wheels, instead of a regular differential. It was very unusual, but it was an idea that also never caught on. There are lots of reasons why truck brands fail. Relay was more expensive than a regular truck. You would have to find a dealer because parts were not available anywhere else. They could have failed for lack of financing as well, just like a lot of truck companies did. There is no indication that truck buyers really worried about appearance of a truck back then, but maybe they were poor performers that didn't last. Sometimes having something really unique was not the best thing. This 1933 Ford really wasn't a paddy wagon to start with. We loaned it to a movie company, and it was used in a Sylvester Stallone movie called Fist. It was shot in Dubuque, and it was released in 1978. In the movie, Fist stood for Federation of Interstate Truckers. Stallone plays a truck driver and union organizer named Johnny Kovac. It was about unions, and it was Stallone's first movie after Rocky. The movie company made it into a paddy wagon. The movie was set in Cleveland in 1937, but it was actually shot in Dubuque. The chassis is a real 1933 Ford. It has a plywood body, and it's painted in the correct colors of a real Cleveland police vehicle in the 1930s. The siren, horns, and everything about it is correct for the Cleveland Police Department in 1937. There is a scene in the movie where Sylvester Stallone gets beat up and thrown into this paddy wagon. This 1933 white truck was made for the Mars Candy Company. It was sold to a meat packer in Antioch, Illinois a few years later. It was used by the meat packer until 1968. It's not a refrigerated truck. It's just an insulated truck. There is no refrigeration unit. The truck is a white Model 4A with a 6-cylinder engine and a 4-speed transmission. It was a local delivery truck. There are some interesting features worth mentioning, though. Inside the heavy metal door, there's a little riding platform that folds down. There's a closet where the driver could hang a coat, and there's a fold-down seat on the passenger side. The seat could be folded up, and the driver could exit curbside. The side windows roll up and down. The windshield partially opens out for ventilation. After more than 30 years of continuous use, the doors still open and close easily. This is a stylish, well-built truck. After all this time, the doors still close with a solid sound and the feel of quality. This 1933 white 643 was made in September 1933 in Cleveland, Ohio. It has a 215-inch wheelbase, which is the longest that the White Motor Company made at that time. Unlike many truck makers who manufactured trucks from parts purchased from other manufacturers, White made almost all of their own components. White made the Model 5A overhead valve engine, which produces 130 horsepower. The transmission is a White Model 10B, which has 5 speeds. The front axle is a White Model 9D. The rear axle is a White 13C with planetary hubs and a 10-to-1 ratio using 24-inch hubs. The tag axle is the only part of the drive chain that was not White made. It is a Truckter tag axle. It also has a White made Metropolitan Couplex cab. White made overhead valve engines for their large trucks from 1926 to 1939, but only a few hundred 5A engines were produced. This planetary rear axle using underslug springs was introduced in 1919 and continued to be White's heaviest rear axle in various design iterations until the late 1930s.
In 1928, Texaco was selling gasoline in all 48 states. The first one to do so, establishing itself as one of the most well-known and most commonly used service stations nationwide. Texaco also established a very strong brand identity. This service station was built by H. Leslie of Mona, Iowa, and was put in use in the late 1930s. In 1937, Texaco developed an iconic look for all its stations. An all-white box station with green striping along the top, glass garage bay doors, and Texaco's trademark Red Star logo. Texaco's registered restroom program was launched just a few years later, setting a standard for all Texaco restrooms to meet a certain level of cleanliness for all motorists to use.
This 1938 Fagile was built to be an off-road logging truck. It is too wide to travel on normal roads. It would not be legal on modern roads. The frame is reinforced with railroad track steel. They hauled heavy loads of logs on this. It was one of 3 of these bought by Robinson Logging in Northern California. This is the only one that has survived. The engine is a Cummins H, which is one of the first truck diesels. It has 150 horsepower, not much by today's standards. It has a 3 and a 4-speed transmission, 12 total forward speeds, and Timken drive axles. This truck is not just big and powerful for its time, it is also pretty extravagant for a truck. The radiator is cast aluminum, shark gill hood fins, ornate hood ornament. Those are the kinds of details that Fagile offered. This truck was made in Oakland, California during the last year of production by Fagile. T.A. Peterman, a California logger, bought the factory and its contents. In 1939, the first Peterbilt was built. In the Fagile tradition, Peterbilts were built with high quality and high standards. This is a 1939 International Armored Police truck. It was made for the Minneapolis Police Department in response to waves of strikes and protests that had plagued the city for most of the 1930s. The entire body of the truck is quarter-inch armor plate. It has bullet deflectors on the front and rear tires. The radiator has a bullet guard. The windshield and all the windows are 2 inches thick. On the windshield, side window, and back window, there are gun ports. You would have been able to carry a lot of ammo in the back. With a machine gun sticking out of the gun port, a load of ammo along with steel plate and bulletproof glass, you would be sitting pretty good in this truck if someone was shooting at you. It has 90 horsepower and weighs 5,660 pounds, so you wouldn't be able to run away from a gunfight, nor would you have been able to catch up with anybody in a pursuit. It has a siren and a light. It's not quite the SWAT vehicle of today, but for its day, it was probably pretty impressive. This is a 1939 Mack BX. The BX was the largest of the early B series of Mack trucks. It has a 519 cubic inch gas engine with overhead valves. It has 128 horsepower and the transmission is a 5-speed. In 1939, that was the first year for the 519 cubic inch engine. The same engine block was later used for the first Mack diesel engine. This one does not have a sleeper, but the BX was the first Mack to offer sleepers as an option. There are 4-wheel brakes on this truck. The first owner was George Atwell Foundation Company of New York City. The truck was used to haul steel beams and other supplies during the construction of Radio City Music Hall in New York City. It was restored by Tom Spencer in 1995. The original top speed was 35 miles per hour, but with some gearing changes it could go over 50 miles per hour. The extra speed along with the sleeper made this a good truck for cross-country hauling. Mack made the BX model from 1932 to 1940, and 15,000 of them were built. In 1942, World War II was going on. This 1942 Mack FJ was built for the United States Army, and it was built as a dump truck. The F Series is a very heavy-duty truck. They are very desirable among truck collectors. It has air brakes, but is still using chain drive. It has a C-cab design that goes all the way back to the AC model starting in 1916. It has a 6-cylinder Mack engine and 2 Mack transmissions. It is all Mack. This truck weighs over 24,000 pounds, and its GVW is 50,000 pounds. On back is a Jaeger 6.5-yard concrete mixer. 6.5 yards of concrete weighs over 26,000 pounds. On today's mixers, the bowl is tilted upward. On here, it's horizontal. You didn't fill it through the unload hatch. There's a side hatch that would have rolled around to the top to fill the concrete mix. It has a separate engine to run the cement mixer, and there's a transmission for the mixer. You mix the cement by turning the barrel one way, and you get it out of there by turning it the other way. There are vanes on the inside of the barrel. When you're mixing it, it is pulling everything toward the front. And when you're dumping it, it's pushing it all out the back. It has giant 1,224 tires. It would have been quite a thing to drive with a full load. When this 1944 Mack EQT was built, it was still wartime, so there was no chrome. No chrome trim on the headlights, none on the grille, no chrome on the bumper, the windshield, the mirrors, or anything. Chrome was needed for engines, and nobody wanted to be seen as gaudy during the war. The truck is a 2-ton, 3 at most. It had a 6-cylinder gas engine, and it was probably a local delivery truck. The tractor on the back is a Fordson. They made tractors, and they also made crawler conversions. You could convert a regular wheeled tractor to a crawler. Fordson was the brand name for tractors made by Henry Ford & Son, Inc. from 1917 to 1920. They were to tractors like the Model T was to cars. Very popular, reliable, low price, mass-produced, and affordable for farmers with dealers all over the country. They also made Fordson trucks at the same time. Ford was the only manufacturer to make cars, trucks, and tractors simultaneously. This Coca-Cola truck has a long story to tell. We bought it from a junkyard in Rock Island, Illinois in 1994. It had been there for 43 years. After we bought it, we parked it outside at the back of our property for another 20 years before we got around to restoring it. Finally, our founder, Carolyn Moon, said, "I want this truck restored before I'm gone." So we got busy restoring it, and that took another 4 years. We put the Coke body on a 1944 white truck chassis. See that fender skirt on the tires? A lot of cars in the 40s, 50s, and 60s had fender skirts. Just made it a little more stylish. We had all the bottle crates made and painted. The local Coca-Cola bottler made a run of these little bottles for us. There's 4,800 little green bottles on there. They're all full of Coca-Cola. We even have an antique stencil machine for printing on the crates. If you wondered how we got all those painted, original-looking wooden crates, this is the machine that did it. This is a 1945 Chevrolet Master and a 1941 Herman trailer. The Dusenberry family of Tucson, Arizona donated this to the museum. They bought it new, both truck and trailer, and they used them into the 1950s. It was the first enclosed moving van in Tucson. Moving vans are now much bigger. People didn't have nearly the stuff they have today. You can tell that by the relatively small size of the van. It's hard to imagine driving this across country, but there are extra gas tanks on it, so obviously that's what they did. The truck has a 234.5 cubic inch Chevrolet gas engine, 6 cylinders, 4-speed transmission with a 2-speed rear axle, and 81.5 horsepower. It is interesting that they were so precise about the engine. We don't know why they didn't make it an even number, but some engineers at the time must have had a reason. Top speed is 45 miles per hour, which was probably downhill with no wind. You lose 30% of the power as drivetrain losses, so you're down 24 horsepower already just because of the friction in the driveline. Then you have wind resistance and hills to slow you down. It was very generous of the Dusenberrys to donate this truck to us. They had restored it, and it came to us in the current condition. This 1946 white WA-22 was originally used as a moving truck. It was bought new in Pennsylvania, and the same person used it until 1979, 31 years. It has a white 6-cylinder, 386 cubic inch gasoline engine, a 4-speed transmission with a 3-speed auxiliary. It was made in Cleveland, Ohio. The sleeper on this truck is only about 18 inches wide. The sleeper is wider than the narrow cab, though. What they did to add the sleeper is to angle the doors out. If you stand in front of the truck and look at the side, you can see that when the windows were open, bugs would come through it, and if someone was in the sleeper, they'd get hit in the face by bugs as the driver traveled on down the road. The windshield wipers are air-operated. Air from the brake system is used to power the wipers. That's how it was done until the 90s. It does have a heater. Many trucks didn't have a heater at this time. The cab is wood-framed, including the doors. There's a metal over the wood frame. After the doors were worn on a truck like this, they wouldn't stay shut. They'd leak. You'd be stuffing rags in to keep the water and the air out. Truck driving was a hard job, and it still is, but running a truck like this made it harder. It has a crossover gas tank, holds about 100 gallons of highly flammable gas, and sits right behind the cab. Diesel fuel can catch fire, but not nearly as easily as gas. Drivers would get into a wreck and burn up instantly.
After World War II, truck sales in the United States skyrocketed, and the demand for truck-tractor combinations increased dramatically. Models like the Mack EQX had a chassis designed for war conditions, but with its enhanced utility, with a chassis from the Mack's 1940s dumper series. This 1948 Mack EQX has gone through several transformations. Beginning its life as a dump truck, it has since been converted into a water truck, and then into the current state as a logging truck. Despite the various changes made to this Mack. The engine and transmission remain the original. Currently, this Mack is on loan to the museum from Jim of Newcastle, California.
What you see here is a classic 1950 style truck. It's a 1950 Peterbilt. Long conventional hood, got an air cleaner sticking out on the side. It's stretched out long. It's got a 5 and a 3-speed transmission, so it's got 15 speeds. Driving and shifting a truck like this is an art. Once you miss a gear, it's very hard to get back into gear. Drivers were real shift masters, and sometimes you put your arm through the steering wheel to shift both levers at once. You planned ahead when you were driving this truck. These early trucks didn't have a very large power band like today's do. You had to run them from about 1600 to 1900 RPMs and stay in that range. If you got down to 1600, you needed to drop a gear. If you got down to 1600 as you were going up a hill, you'd better drop 2 gears. If you had to drop to where you had to shift both of them, you wanted to make sure not to do it on a curve. This is a Western truck. It's long. You would not have had a truck like this in the Midwest or East in the 50s. It's just too long. The cab doesn't really look any different than that 1938, nor does it look any different than the 1968 or today's Peterbilt. Maybe the angle of windshields has softened a little bit on today's, but the overall exterior cab design has not changed very much. Contract Freighters Inc. in Joplin, Missouri started with trucks like this 1952 GMC. It's a 4-cylinder Detroit diesel with a 5-speed transmission and a 2-speed rear axle. That was standard for GMCs back then. It has a nicely restored Graham trailer, which was very popular back then as well. This is a replica unit with what CFI started with. Contract Freighters Inc., CFI, was a truckload carrier. In 2007, they were sold to Conway. At the time of the sale, they operated over 2,600 tractors, more than 7,000 trailers, and employed approximately 2,500 drivers. This was not a long-haul truck. The gas tanks are too small. It has a bench seat, and it would not have been a comfortable truck. This 1959 GMC 860 has had a busy life. It has a lot of old friends who remember it fondly. McMorhan, a milk and livestock hauler in Wisconsin, purchased this truck new in 1959, and it was the first of hundreds of diesels in the company's fleet. The trucking company was also a GMC dealer. It has a 6-71 diesel engine, a 5x2 transmission with overdrive, and a belt-driven tag axle, which has been removed. For several years, this truck often did double duty, hauling livestock at night and milk in the daytime. It was used to haul milk from a dairy in Plattsville, Wisconsin to Champaign, Illinois, a 12-hour round trip. Drivers recalled that it was the fastest truck between Plattsville and Champaign. It was the first diesel that several rookie McMorhan drivers handled. Many of them retired as drivers years later with great memories of the GMC 860. Jim Francis, a trucking farmer who bought the truck long after it was retired by McMorhan, used it to haul his case dozer for many years. When buying parts from the GMC dealership that was owned by McMorhan, it was discovered in the year 2000 that this was the original diesel in the McMorhan fleet. The now retired drivers, who were rookies when they first drove this truck, were happy to be reunited with this GMC 860.
Part of Ford's 4th generation F-Series, the 1963 F600 was a popular priced medium-duty truck known for its liability and durability. With a John Deere corn sheller attached to the bed, this F600 acted as a stationary combine. After picking and drying their corn, farmers would use a mobile sheller like this to remove kernels from the corn. A corn sheller from John Deere allowed farmers to shell up to 20 acres of corn in a single day. During the shelling process, the truck would idle. Dust and other small particles would be released into the air while the shelling took place. And the rotating screen cage on the front grille was used to protect the truck's radiator or engine from being damaged. John Deere No. 6 corn sheller was designed as a big capacity sheller to meet the requirements of custom shellermen. You mount the No. 6 on the truck bed, and with either the truck drive or the tractor belt drive, you can expect to shell about 1,000 bushels per hour. This sheller was the company's second largest model ever made at that time. Designed to give you many years of service, they had an option of getting the multi-luber system on the sheller. This system makes equipment safer and much easier to lubricate than ever before. For example, on the system 227 corn picker, you can lubricate 48 vital bearings instantly, all from the safety of the tractor seat while you continue picking corn. No time is lost, and positive lubrication is assured. With rugged construction, with proper operation and lubrication, will result in longer life and better performance that will add to your shelling profits.
The design for this 1963 Mercedes Unimog is over 50 years old. Mercedes built them for the German military, and they still make them today. They now have more creature comforts and options, but the design is still the same. It's an all-wheel drive vehicle. The axles on this truck are higher than the center of the tires. They are driven by gears at the end of the axle hub. With the higher ground clearance, this truck can go through water. If it gets stuck, there is a nice, easy place to hook up a chain and pull it out. The small downward shining lights are for wartime conditions. They give the driver just enough light to drive by, but not so much that enemy aircraft could see the truck from above. It is a very difficult truck for the driver to get into and out of. You could easily fall trying to get in it. I imagine it would be even more difficult if you were wearing a bulletproof vest and other military gear. In the back, there are two long fold-down benches on either side that will hold about 8 people each. The benches fold down for troops and up for cargo. It certainly is not a truck made for comfort. In the 1960s, 1964 International Emeryville was the cab-over truck that you saw most of. They are called Emeryvilles because they were made in Emeryville, California. It was a well-priced and well-made truck. It's an assembled truck with a Cummins engine and a Fuller transmission. There were a lot of these on the road into the 1970s. It does have a sleeper cab, still small though. Truck designers weren't worried about providing drivers with a palace to sleep in, and they did not want the weight. Weight is very important in the truck. Early sleepers were 21 to 22 inches wide. An average man is 18 to 19 inches from shoulder to shoulder. Big men can be 24 to 25 inches from side to side. A lot of men would have been sleeping with their shoulders scrunched together, or at least with no room for their arms to rest on the side of their bodies. So they slept with their arms crossed, making it a lot like a coffin. Sleeper sizes have grown to keep up with the size of truckers. Now they're 36 to 48 inches wide, and in some cases, wide enough for a double bed. In the early years, there wasn't much thought about comfort. This 1966 auto car is all stainless steel sheet metal, including the bumper. For several years, Autocar made these, 1 or 2 at a time, for Edgecombe Steel. They made 13 of them through the years. 8 or 9 have survived. This one has a diesel engine. Only 2 of them were diesel. The truck had some fair-sized dents in it when we got it. When you are doing stainless steel body work, you can't hide anything with body putty. There cannot be any imperfections. The front bumper was scratched and dented. We didn't replace anything. We restored it slowly, carefully, and with a lot of filing and polishing. The bumper and all the sheet metal is original. Stainless steel is a tough material. It does not dent easily like thin gauge sheet metal. The worst part about driving something like this would be driving into the sun and having the reflection and flare come at you from the stainless steel. But this is a truck that definitely attracts attention. Truck makers have made special-purpose trucks over the years, and this 1969 International Lodestar was made for the mobile home transportation trade. It was used to pull mobile homes, and then to move them around in a trailer court to set them up for being occupied. Notice the mirrors? They're mounted in a way that allows them to be extended. Mobile homes are 12 to 14 feet wide, and you would have needed these extended mirrors to see past the mobile home. The funniest part of this truck is that it is so short. Actually, this is an adjustable wheelbase truck. You can make it longer or shorter by pulling or replacing a few pins. On the road, you would have a longer, better handling truck. When you got into the trailer court, the truck was real short so you could maneuver it easily. If you were traveling on a highway with the truck in the short position, it would be very easy for the mobile home to manhandle you if there was a stiff breeze. That's why you would want the longer wheelbase for the open road. You don't see these trucks around anymore. Mobile homes are now moved with regular long wheelbase over-the-road trucks. The new trailer courts have the trailers positioned further apart, so maneuvering them into tight spaces is no longer needed. GMC and Chevrolet, both owned by General Motors, wanted to be in the semi-market in the 1980s, and this is a 1986 GMC Astro. General Motors has a very good dealer network, and they tried to take advantage of that, but they were never a very popular truck. This is a good-looking truck. They were well-made and well-designed, but one of the downfalls of their main offering was a two-stroke Detroit diesel, which had fallen out of favor with drivers. They leaked and used a lot of oil. They don't have great torque, so you shifted a lot if you had a Detroit. This was about the same time that length laws for trucks went away, so the cab-over style was no longer necessary. It has the advantage of being shorter, but the driver sits directly over the front axle, so the ride is rough. It has a ladder, but was still not comfortable to get into and out of. This is a day cab. This one was a test truck, and it has very low miles on it. You don't see any GMC or Chevrolet trucks on the road now. General Motors sold their business to White. It was called White GMC for a while, then bought by Volvo. The GMC General, along with the Chevrolet Bison, were the largest Class 8 conventional cab trucks produced by General Motors. This 1986 GMC General was produced in Pontiac, Michigan, before being phased out as part of a GM-Volvo joint venture in 1987. The General was the last Class 8 truck produced by GMC. Several different power plants were available. A buyer could choose from the Cummins N Series, Detroit Diesel 8V71 or 8V97, or the Caterpillar 3408. The cabs were all aluminum and produced by the Budd Company. Volvo held an 85% stake in the Volvo-GM joint venture. Volvo had acquired White Motor Company in 1980. The joint venture was called the Volvo-GM Heavy Truck Corporation. Trucks were sold under the combined White GMC nameplate. Ultimately, the GMC trucks were phased out and replaced with White-designed Volvo GM products.
John the Mouse Travel Map is available for Google Maps. It will help plan your route to the locations of your favorite videos. It is free to use. I have the link below. Please visit the playlist tab for videos that I have sorted for you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button